thinking about what it means to be talking to you all here with my microphone into the ether. Starting to think about Marshall McLuhuan again and our media problems and the power of radio and why Kanye West got into so much trouble for mentioning that certain person who may have made use of a microphone. And of course, we're going to end up with Sauron and Tolkien. So this is actually a Tolkien stream. So I am told by little birds on the internet and by, hits on my blog and stuff like that, that there's been a certain degree of interest in some of the blog posts that I've put up in the last year, which is kind of, incredible in itself because I really haven't been blogging very much this year. I've been talking to you all in the Mosaic Art and hoping by way of using this audio medium, this is audio visual medium, but this audio medium rather than the visual medium of writing, to be able to convey some of the things that I found difficult to get people to literally hear when I only write them. But of course, back in the autumn, when Kiltz and I were talking about Ye's comments about the media, can I just say it like that? I mean, we were trying to put things in context that we heard as Christians, as we heard as American and Australian across the conversations that we'd have been having about Christianity and what we heard Ye saying about that, and showing you what Ari Shafir said about what he heard about Ye saying. And I needed to make some kind of a comment back. It's down on the blog in I think December after Ye went on InfoWars and costumed himself in a particular way and then got photoshopped into a picture of the Oval Office. And I saw that image as quite resonant. And I do mean that orally. I saw it as quite resonant for the kind of things that Kiltz and I have been trying to talk about in terms of media effects. That they're Mr. West, and I'm so fascinated. His name is West, right? He's talking about the Western civilized Western world, and his name is West. How is that real? It sounds like a stage name. So he's sitting there in the Oval Office with a hostage mask on, and as I see it, and as I've been trying to explain things out in the world for some time now, we are being held hostage in the West by a number of different stories that we live in. I'm preparing tonight to get back on a plane again. I hope Southwest is flying on its usual schedule tomorrow to go to a fencing tournament for the first time in 3 years. And I realize that in all of the time that we've been doing all of this work in Telegram and the Dragon Common Room, certainly in the Mosaic Arc, I haven't been to a tournament. I was a fencer from 2003 to 2019. I've fenced at least 3 national tournaments every year for nearly decades. And then suddenly it was all gone. And here I was sitting talking to the world through a camera, having my classes on Zoom. 3 years ago this spring, I was teaching my Tolkien class. That cycle has come back around. I'm teaching Tolkien again. And I was thinking about the power of the ring and the power that Sauron exercised over Middle-earth and what that taught me about what was happening to us 3 years ago, because I'm sure you all are now forgetting because memory is like this. But 3 years ago, we were suddenly told that we couldn't go outside anymore. Couldn't go to campus. I couldn't collect my books from campus because we were not allowed on campus, because we had to sit at home talking to each other through the internet, and being told that there was a deadly virus out there that if we dared to step outside without a mask on would kill us all. The sort of astonishing level of fear that we were living through. I blogged about that at the time because I had been meditating already about the sort of magical effects of this narrative that we were suddenly caught inside of, about a virus from bats. I've been joking with my friend, my undergraduates all through winter quarter about don't eat bat soup, because I did not believe the wet market story even then. We won't go into what I believe now about exactly the transmission, but I doubt they're good guys in simple terms in any of these stories. And it's interesting coming back around in this cycle, and I finally get to go to a tournament again, and I'm teaching Tolkien again, and here I am thinking about the power that Sauron had to cast fear. And so when I was writing about what I saw Ye doing and the fear that I saw people participating in, so a lot of this was on my mind, obviously. Also, what was on my mind is the way in which, indeed, 3 years ago, when I was teaching Eurociv, and we'd been talking about the French Revolution and World War I, and then World War II, and the horrors of World War II, and what happen. And you're always wondering, aren't you? Aren't you? You should be. You should be. Wondering, we need to understand how we got caught up in these spells. And I heard Mr. West, I'm going to call him Mr. West now because I think that's the right, it's like Reservoir Dogs, which I never saw, but what Mr. Pink and Mr. White and Mr. Orange and who knows, Mr. West. He's a performer. He's used to using a microphone to amplify his voice, to have different effects on people's attention because of the amplification of his body's ability to make language and sound and music and so forth. And one of the things he said in that fateful appearance on media was about the microphone and who made it what it was and why it was so popular. And of course, if you say that, then the whole world explodes because I say we are in it. Still, we're in that media moment that created the horrors of the Second World War. If you want, and I know you all want, because you're good people and you want to not be the bad people, if you want not to end up in that situation again, we need to be mindful of the way we use our media. We need to be mindful of the way we use our tools. And our greatest tools, what Marshall McLuhan always talked about in the sense of our media, they're extensions of our nervous system and our physical abilities, and everything that we do, projecting ourselves out into the world through our tools, through rocks and blades and textiles and paper and roads and ships and railroads and telegraph and radio. And I'm really, really angry that people keep misunderstanding me because I have been very clear in my speech throughout all of this, in radio, into the internet. You need to understand how they work. Kilt and I, we're making this mosaic ark. We chose the metaphor of the ark because we recognize that we're in a flood right now. We're in, civilization is floundering. We're in terrible danger. We played off a lot of imagery of pirates and pirates sailing on the seas, and that's fun and everything. But we mean that we're in the ark. You need to be in the ark, in the boat, that the ship of the church that's going to survive the flood again. And so our title here is Mosaic Ark, and that's meant to have lots of layers. If people would only listen to me, they'd get all the layers all the time that I'm always speaking in because I speak in myth. We're in the Mosaic Ark, the Ark of the Covenant that was shown to Moses on the mountain, that carries the tablets, that carries the presence that the presence manifests in the temple. We're also in the ark, the mosaic, right? The patterns and images and stories that we're collecting from all around the internet, right? That's my pigeon, my dear sweet beloved pigeon is all collecting more stories right now, right? It's like we're always looking for the hints of that thing. It's not the man behind the curtain, right? It's not really Wizard of Oz, the man behind the curtain. It could be the dragon breaking through. It's the reality breaking through everywhere that we are trying to show you by way of our conversations here, by way of our writing, by way of all of the art that we're working with, where to sense the reality of the myth we are sailing through, right? And in that, we have both the historical ark that Moses made with the instructions that he got on the mountain, that he carries in the wilderness, that is taken by David to Jerusalem, which is housed in the temple that Solomon built. That's the historical ark, right? We also have the allegorical ark, the thing, the images and patterns and everything that we're collecting through. And we likewise have, I suppose this one's the anagogical ark. I don't know. It's the incarnational ark. It's Mary. She is the ark that carries all of these stories and truths and mythologies for us because she is the temple through whom Christ became incarnate in the world. And insofar as we have been constantly for you working on all of these levels, you must recognize that when I say Mr. West sits on a desk in the midst of a story and I say this is very true and we're caught in this story, I mean it on these levels. So there's a historical level, there's an allegorical level, there's a moral level, it's a tropological level, and there's a contemplative level. So thinking about rings and power and mythologies and narratives and the way that they carry us into the dramas that we find ourselves in. How did Sauron do it? Right? So Tolkien gets very, very upset in the preface to the second edition of The Lord of the Rings when people are saying, oh, well, it must have been, it's World War II. It must have been the atomic bomb, right? There's some kind of tech out there that if only, the good guys had gotten a hold of, then wait, we were the good guys. We did have the atomic bomb and we did use it, the good guys. Tolkien said, no, that's not the ring. The ring is something else. The ring Ring is addictive? Well, yes, no. I mean, it's something that draws you in, that you become, first your will, Frodo has the will to take it on and off, and then later, the more it takes hold of him, he can't will himself off. I mean, it sounds a lot like addiction, but it's not quite, a substance you ingest, so it doesn't feel like it's a physical addiction. It's somehow something that captures your will and makes you want to be in control of other people's wills, right? Which is what, when Sauron made the ring, he said, one ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. If we follow Marshall McLuhan's suggestions to be thinking on multiple levels of meaning, as he does in his study of medieval education, the Trivium, and he thinks in these terms, he thinks like I do in the grammatical, poetical, symbolic levels of story that we're caught in. And McLuhan is actually writing this dissertation at about the same time. He's in Cambridge, Tolkien is in Oxford, that Tolkien is writing The Lord of the Rings. You realize we're catching something of the moment in the 40s. They're both sensing power of some sort. What is it? What was Sauron's magic? Well, I'm freaking out right now, and I posted a picture on my Telegram before I went online right now to say, here, look, I'm looking at it, right? I've got my ring of fire through which I'm staring to talk to you, and it looks so very much like a ring, an eye that I look into, and I realize that people have gotten upset with me over the last several years saying, you, as a tenured professor from the University of Chicago, how dare you use your platform to speak? And I started thinking about that. I was thinking platform. They're mad, they're angry. Some people, a few people, some people like it, right? But people are upset with me because I use my platform to amplify my ability to make comments, and it's amplification, right? That there's a fear and a terror in what those of us who have been able to capture some audience's attention in the internet context are able to do. You're starting to see we're already in this. It's like if you wonder how we were all brought under the ring 3 years ago, and then we were all thrown on Zoom, and then we had to learn to talk to cameras at each other and feel part of this interesting extension of our nervous system that we call the internet, right? That we extend they're virtual voices because they're electronically modulated into digits and then transmitted on light beams, somehow ultralight beams, into the Ethernet, and that we have the illusion of participating in a conversation with each other. Well, we're kind of, one of the things that McLuhan understood about media is that we're in it like that. You don't appreciate its effects. You feel its power, and you know it's out there somehow designing reality around you. I mean, like stories do that. I've been talking about the multiple layers of meaning in scripture, effectively, history, allegory, tropology, anagogy, and the multiple levels of experience that we have when we're trying to participate in those stories, because we are in time, we are in meaning and allegory, we are in a drama of choices, our morality, and we are being pointed to heaven in some way. So we're like, our whole life is at multiple layers. It's not just texts that do that, right? Our entire life is at multiple layers. That you are aware somehow of being in all of this, being affected by it, and yet it's simply there. Casey, Sauron overwhelmed people's senses, kind of like 24/7 mass media. Yes, and yet there is a very specific key to the kind of media I think Tolkien realized he was thinking about, but he wasn't able to name it because, as McLuhan points out, we're not usually able to name the media that's shaping all of our experience. Casey, would you say Orwell? Yes, you've got it. Yes, Casey, would you say Orwell was tapping into the same wavelength as Tolkien and Lewis? Yes, absolutely. There's also an Orson Welles in all of this. Silent Draco. Saruman's voice. Yes, Saruman tempted and guiled others. Okay, so we're getting there. Now, remember what Ye said. That particular person who's famous for using one of these, Mr. West was wrong about said certain person actually inventing it, but it was true that this certain person who was the leader of a certain party, they made very, powerful use of a particular kind of technology called a blue. All right, it's a microphone, right? And Mr. West actually said that, something to the lines of so-and-so invented it. Well, he didn't invent it, but these bottle mics, actually not blue, it's a bottle mic, right? This one's a blue. Bottle mic was the most, I guess, it was the technologically most sophisticated microphone of the day, and they use it, of course, to transmit by radio. What is Sauron's tower? I know, it's going to destroy it all. It's like collapsing in the allegory and the myth and everything. It's a radio tower! And therefore, anybody who's watching this, when I published it, will see the cover that Noeasy very nicely made for me when I was meditating about all this. It's like Sauron's tower is a microphone. It's interesting that Tolkien describes it as an eye that seems to be seeing everything, but the sort of feeling of being utterly surrounded by Sauron's attention, it's less visual and much more auditory.